I had basically $100,000. My plan was to make it last 5 years in New York. If I made it after 5 years, I'd see where I was. I'd reevaluate school. So that was my goal. I got to 3 years, and I was down to, I'm like 3/4 of the way through the third year, and I'm down to like $30,000. Yeah. I'm like, this ain't gonna make it another 2. What am I gonna do? And September 2012, that's when I looked up and I'm like, yo, I'm running out of bread. Maybe I should go back to the bank. Nah, I can't do that. I won't be active. I won't be on air every day of the week anymore. Yeah. I won't be able to go to whatever shows. I won't be able to check out these open mics. And I was like, all right, what does this look like if I go broke? Like if I have no money, what does this look like?
Let's get it started.
Double O.
Free range, motherfucker. Check 1 2. It's your host Double O, and you are tuned into episode 3 of the Free Range podcast. This week we have the homie Justin Hunte on, a.k.a. the company man. He's interviewed me actually a bunch of times, so it was fun to really get him on the flip side. We talk about his finance beginnings, his really strong sense of self-awareness really early in his life that has allowed him, I think, to make a lot of the decisions that you'll hear about with a sense of calm, because he truly understands what his worth is in all these situations. We also talk about his hands-on approach to really dissecting his interests and how that in turn has led him in these vastly different directions, starting in finance, ending up in journalism, and then making the pivot into video. Really cool, really thoughtful episode, and we obviously have some twists and turns in there as I try to get my weird ideas off. I'd like to thank you guys if you've been tuned in, if you're just tuning in. We have an email address up, freerangetalk@gmail.com. Would love to hear your opinions, questions, concerns, anything you have. Hit me up, freerangetalk@gmail.com. And now to the show. Thank you for coming, Justin.
Yo, man, thank you for having me, man.
No problem. I'll have you on the other side of the fucking joint now.
It's a rarity, man. It's weird. It still is a little uncomfortable being interviewed when you've basically been interviewing for a decade.
Yeah, well, this is a conversation, so it's two-way, so it's fine. So you have all your, you have all the.
I'm not used to being on the couch. Usually I'm in the chair.
So let's jump into that. Actually, I find
reflexes. My bad, man.
No, it's all good. I find it really interesting. In terms of your background, like what made you, or what was existing prior to you jumping into this space that even gave you the ideas that you wanted to? Because you were in finance before. Right. That was clearly the plan.
I don't know if it was a plan. I've always had a series of dream jobs. I've never had one thing I want to do. I've always had a lot of things that I wanted to do. And my initial reflexes have always been, life is better when I do the things I like than it is when I do the things that I don't like. And I'll only allow myself to do the things I don't like if they're towards the things that I do like.
Yeah.
Right. So that's always just been my mindset more than anything else.
What were you exactly doing now?
Well, my first job was with a company called Milliken and Company. Okay. Now, Milliken at the time was the largest privately owned chemical and textile company in America. And so when I was in high school, I went to this camp called SLI, Senior Leadership Institute. It was at Wofford College. But the camp was taking high school kids. You go to a camp for a week. They give you a football helmet or some item. You have to create a product out of it and then present it to the board. Okay. Right? So since high school, I've been indoctrinated with capitalistic principles, pitch and stuff like that, right? So funny. I majored in finance because a friend of mine was like, shout out to George Burdett, that was his name. He was like, do you know what you're going to major in? And I was like, no. He was like, I do. I'm a major in finance. No matter what I do, my dad's in finance. And he said, no matter what I do, there's money in it. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. So that's how I got into finance in the first place. And so it's funny, my college, I went to Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Terriers, second smallest D1 school in the nation. We scrappy.
It's still D1 now.
It's still D1, right? We made it. While I was at college, I studied abroad in Amsterdam. And that was my first time ever living alone in a big city. My first time ever living someplace that was cold and had different weather. First time being around international people. First time being on another continent and that far away from my parents.
And living around black people that don't speak English.
Right, yeah. Right. And that aren't, like, there's no African Dutch, right? They have a lot of people from Suriname.
Yep, my family.
A lot of Moors that are there as well. But they don't call them African Dutch, right?
Yeah.
Like African American is a term that is in America. They didn't have, I'd never seen that before. I'm like, aren't these people African Dutch?
It's like, no, they're what they are.
They're what they are, right? So all of that was brand new perspective. And when I went back to college, I ended up interning for that company, Milliken, again. They offered me a job, obviously, because I went to this camp, and then I went to the college, and then I interned. So I'm like, what this camp is supposed to do. And they said, well, what would it take for you to join this company? And I said, you know what? You could put me in Europe or put me in New York, and I'd be down. Because the international experience was so
fancy
impactful.
Guy. What gave you the balls to even say that back then?
I was black at an all-white school, like 80%. Like, let's say school was 8% black or whatever, private liberal arts Methodist college. If the school was 8% black, 80% of that 8% played football. Right, so I didn't play a sport at the school.
And you were in finance.
I was in finance. When I went to that camp, SLI, that was the first year that camp ever existed. I was a counselor at the camp the next 2 summers before I interned. And at that point, I'm the example of what this program is supposed to do.
So you were able to assess your worth that young. Like, you just knew inherently, like, oh yeah, I'm in a great position. Yeah, to be able to 100%,
because I had a great relationship with them. My grades were great, and I mean, if you're starting anything and you need an example of the success of what a program is supposed to be, you need people who not only understand the business and the company, but also are part of that program. It was just going to happen.
No, it's funny though, because I remember in high school. Always had good grades. So that was the easy thing, science fairs, all those sort of things. But I remember first time I ran pen relays, sophomore year.
I used to go to that every summer when I was a kid. My parents used to take me when I was like 2, 3, 4 years old.
And so
Bill Cosby used to be out there.
Yep. And so we got to, I ran. And I remember telling my homie, I was like, I come to school here. And he was like, yeah, it's an Ivy League school. And I was just like, that was it. Like, I was just like, it's never good. It's not going to happen. Like, that was how quickly my idea was crushed. Right. And the only reason that I even could fathom an Ivy League school was because in between my junior and senior year, I got my first recruiting letter from Princeton. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. So this is a real thing. So I'm interested in like where that, I guess as I got older, I definitely got a little bit more ballsy. But I just remember like it felt like a lot of decisions just not necessarily happen to me, but it takes like the one little thing to unfold to make it be like, oh yeah, you can do this. Right. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I'll look at those things as either indicators of interest or beginner's luck. Like, I follow those type of signs resolutely throughout my life because there's a reason the universe puts certain opportunities on your table.
If you so believe.
For me.
No, I mean, I definitely, there is something outside of us or not outside of us, just something we don't understand yet that I feel like connects the dots a lot more than we would maybe want to give it credit for, if that makes sense.
What is it? Energy can't be created or destroyed, right? It can be manipulated and shifted. Yeah. And it'll take you different places depending on the energy that you put out or the energy that you follow. But when something good happens, I follow the good stuff, right? So that's how I knew that I had a leverage point, because it's not like they were going to take the offer away. What are they going to say? Oh, well, because you said those two places, you don't have a job offer anymore. Yeah, no. And if they did say that, that's fine too, because at that point in time, I wasn't specific about what I wanted to do. I just knew I was young, I had opportunities, and I wanted to make some money. And everything had finance in it. And if I could be someplace that was like Amsterdam, it'd be dope.
So they gave you the job, obviously.
They gave me a job in New York.
Get to New York.
Right. And so
where do you live first?
I lived in Coney Island, Brooklyn, where my parents are from. Wow. Well, my mom's from Coney Island. My dad's from Brownsville. But I lived with my grandma for the first 6 months.
Where, if you don't mind me asking?
Gravesend. You know Coney Island?
Yeah, my grandmother lived on Neptune Avenue and like Ocean Parkway. So
Say word. That's what's up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's where I'd spent most of my when I was like the last couple of years when I lived in Brooklyn. That's where I was.
That's what's up. My grandma's on 33rd Neptune.
Yeah.
And my other cousin's on 25th and Mermaid. I've got a lot of family in Coney Island. My mom grew up there. My parents, or my grandmother.
Who else was from there? Teray, right?
Teray's from Coney Island.
I remember having a bunch of
who else is there?
conversations.
Lance Stevenson.
Hilarious. I lived right across.
Stephon Marbury.
Yeah, well, my grandmother's building is across from Lincoln.
Okay.
So
that's where my mom went to high school.
Hilarious.
Right. Yeah. Coldest place on earth in the wintertime.
Yeah, that wind comes through off on that boardwalk and you feel, man. Yeah, there are parts of, people always, obviously, all my Chicago homies talk that shit about the Midwest. But any of those like Rockaway, Coney Island, Manhattan, Orchard Beach, all that stuff on that side of Brooklyn during the winter,
it's totally different.
Yeah. So you're in Coney Island, so that's an hour and change into financial district?
At least an hour and a half. And actually, Milliken was based, so it was the credit department at Milliken, so it was on 40th and 6th.
Oh, so you had to go even further than just going.
It was a bus to a train because they hadn't, the D line was under construction, so it was the W back then, which was all local. Straight local. You couldn't switch until you got to Atlantic Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah. In Atlantic Pacific, you could jump on something. Right. Yeah. So, I lived there for the first 6 months and then I moved out and moved to Sunset Park. But I worked at Milliken for the first.
What time is it?
Represent.
But yeah, no. So Sunset Park is funny because I remember watching that movie. I didn't know anybody lived there. I just knew that a place existed. Because that was like one of the. I don't think it's gentrified yet, but I want to feel like that was one of
Sunset Park?
Yeah.
Now or then?
Well, then wasn't.
It's interesting. It wasn't as gentrified. I guess I look at myself as part of the gentrifiers, to be honest, right? Because that neighborhood was so Latin, so Puerto Rican, so Dominican. Those guys had been there for 40, 50 years. And before then, it was an Irish neighborhood. Yeah. Right? So Sunset Park is the most interesting place to me because in New York City in 2003, probably till 2012 or so, 12, 13. Sunset Park is all brownstones. There's no public housing, high-rise public housing towers like that. And while I was there, it was the center of a turf war, right? You had, from the north, you had all the gentrifiers coming down from Park Slope trying to buy up the brownstones. Yeah. To the east, over on 8th Avenue, that's Brooklyn's Chinatown. So they were buying up all the property they could, all the brownstones they could, trying to get close to the 4th Avenue where the train line was. Because the neighborhood was Puerto Rican and Dominican, everybody spoke Spanish. So you had all these Mexicans who were moving in there because they could speak Spanish and navigate. So you had 3 different languages going at the same time. Few people knew another well enough to tell a joke, and every place delivered. The laundromat delivered, the liquor store delivered.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The grocery store delivered because you had so many illegal immigrants between the Mexicans and the Chinese people who were in that same neighborhood. But now it's like Williamsburg.
Yeah. So before we jump into the finance part, coming from South Carolina into New York, segregation exists because you can name neighborhoods. You're like, oh, that's where the Puerto Ricans live. That's where the Dominicans live. That's where the Black people live. That's where the Hasidic Jewish people live. But because of the subway and because of the way that New York is structured, you're forced to always integrate during migration and during, regular errands and sort of stuff like that. Did it feel noticeably different coming from South Carolina where it was like, oh, this is a different sort of America or like...
A little bit. I mean, one thing I expected more of was more integration in New York City. Yeah. Right? Everyone talked about New York like it was a melting pot. New York's not a melting pot. It's a salad bowl. Everybody's in there, but they ain't mixing like that.
Yeah, but like I said, it's like integrated migration. It's like you got to get on the train, regardless of what stop you get on the train on. You're going to be dealing with other people and a lot of people, and they're going to be pressed up against you, and it's going to be fucking packed.
But see, that right there is the fact that you run into everybody on the subways. People don't really talk to you on the subway.
Yeah, but I feel like the gift and the curse in New York is that there is this forced proximity effect where it's just like you can't just isolate. You can't just say like, oh, this is just us and this is the only way it exists. And when I see those people, it's on television. It's this very foreign idea. Right. It's like, no, I may not talk to a lot of those people, but I'm going to be pressed up against this person today. I might have to buy coffee from this other person who's running this, those coffee carts. Like, it's all these immigrant populations that are just trying to figure shit out. Right. Like, nobody's necessarily massively, above and beyond everybody else. Like, in their places, they might be. Sure. Like, you might have Russians run this sort of taxi cab thing. You have, Indian, Southeast Asians.
I'll say yes and no. I think the difference between if you're an immigrant, at least chances are you have people who've already set up housing or a business or something, right? They came in with some sort of investment. They're able to carve out their piece of the American dream. Black people aren't immigrants.
No.
So there isn't a difference in investment. But in New York, you're not just
dealing with Black people,
right?
African-American Black people. You're dealing with Jamaicans and Panamanians.
Which are immigrants.
No, 100%.
So they come in with it. So when, looking at, let's say we're looking at the economic hierarchy, I definitely don't see the same disparity as you'll see in the South. As there's not as many gaps between tiers, we'll say that. But there is a significant gap in ownership.
100%.
And that is one of the things I think is super interesting for a place like New York City, because if you don't own anything in New York City, it's very difficult to make money in New York City.
No, you're at a ridiculous disadvantage. And putting your finance hat on, right? I've been mulling a lot of these ideas, random ideas around in terms of what real progress would mean. In the fact that, like, capitalism probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon, right? So it's like, if you want to exist in the structure that America is right now, do you think that a version 2018, 2019, 2020 near future version of like a Black Wall Street can exist without it?
I don't have an example of mass Black ownership.
But isn't that what Atlanta is, though?
I don't think Atlanta is I think Atlanta has a lot more money from other communities in it. I think there's exceptions, sure. I'm not sure how many of Tyler Perry's investors are from other places. But to have a Black Wall Street, I think from my perspective, the history of Black Wall Street was powerful because in a lot of ways it started with Black-owned banks. And perhaps
we have some of those now.
Some, I think, is awesome, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I don't have an example of mass Black ownership that isn't attacked at some point from, like, when you take money out of other communities. Meaning, if Black people, for example, are like, you know what, we're all just going to bank at Black-owned banks. I think there would be a massive economic attack from one way or the other from outside financial institutions once they realize that their deposits are dwindling because there's organization around it. And that was the power of Black Wall Street. It was community owned. It was isolated because it was the only place they truly were allowed to live. Yeah. And then when they got more powerful, when they were more successful, then the surrounding non-Black communities, they got bombed. You look at the Black Panthers, it's very similar. They were trying to set up the same situation in a lot of ways.
That's a little bit of a different situation, only because to have someone like as crazy as like fucking Hoover in office, you could have one of those singular people that just wants to tear. Because I guess the way I look at it now,
that's looking at it from a government standpoint, right? I mean, when I look at where we are from a capitalism standpoint, right, from just position wise, private industry, companies are no longer beholden to America or any country. We have globalization on a different level.
Yeah,
so a lot of these companies are bigger than most of these countries, right? Exxon is more valuable than Greece. You know what I mean? So once you get to a level where you have private industry that is essentially owns the government, then the attack isn't coming from, within the government in the same way.
Yeah.
It's allowing private industry to do whatever it needs to do and using the government to set the parameters around that. So in the 70s, sure, I think it definitely Hoover made it his mission to make sure that
shit got fucked up.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think right, but I don't think that the evil villain will come from the FBI before it comes from, Jamie Dimon. Not to throw him under a bus, or from a CEO of a large company.
Yeah, but I guess the way I look at it now is because of globalization, the conversation in terms of the diaspora is also very different. And you see now, especially on, you see what the continent of Africa has been able to do, where the digital divide was who knows what, 10 years ago. And now, because cell phones are in villages, it's just they skipped a step, but now they're in this whole different sort of space, right? Like they've jumped in where now their smartphone is maybe the way that they enter the internet, the way they listen to music, the way they do all that sort of stuff. But, they skipped a whole lot of the steps that having to worry about having, let's say, a cell phone in the home, all of that. When some of my homies go DJ like in Nigeria or Ghana, it's like, what? Like they're following somebody on Instagram that you'd be like, oh yeah, what you're doing is dope. Come out here and DJ. That's a very different economic conversation now, though, where prior to it had to be, if you're talking about self-generated American-based sort of things, now you can have these extended conversations with Africa, the Caribbean, South America.
One of the things I'm most excited about is what Ghana's doing with Year of the Return, right? They're giving free visas, right to abode to people of the diaspora in the Western Hemisphere. They want Black people from North America, the Caribbean, South America to come back to Ghana. I've been living my whole life hearing, why don't you go back to Africa? This is the first time in my life I've heard Africa or someplace in Africa say, why don't you come on back? Yeah. And I think that opportunity is amazing. I think that if we're going to have a Black Wall Street situation or a line of an economic pipeline, across the Atlantic Ocean or worldwide, I think it'll be amazingly powerful. I don't think it'll be headquartered in America. I don't. And because
does it need to, though? Does it need a headquarters at this point?
When I think about Black Wall Street, I think about the Black American experience.
That's kind of why I was trying to switch it and talk about it in a 2019 idea. Like maybe
a global sense.
It's an app. Maybe it's a thing that exists that is not.
I would love to see it.
I think the conversations need to be more around the ability to set up powerful pillars of whether it be benefiting from all the cultural intellectual property that is given up to Fortnites and all that sort of shit all the time.
Do you think they're going to win that case real quick, Simon?
I hope they do.
Can you patent a dance?
I have no clue what. Maybe they could find some sort of loophole because obviously you can patent your face.
Right. And
so if it's like, oh, I invent this move is inherent to me, right? Although I don't know if that can be proven because so many of these moves come from other things. So that's that thing, for instance, right? Like, because I have a very ridiculous loose idea. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I feel like all these rappers, they talk, obviously, you have Killer Mike doing great things. You have T.I., you have, Trey the Truth. Everybody's pushing, obviously, investment in sort of Black banks. But I almost look at it as just like, what if, from a cultural standpoint, if we bought like an HBCU and used that as kind of like the centerpiece for a larger sort of idea?
Man.
And be able to be like, we're crafting cultural ideals, not that they can be policed, but like when we start having issues like a Fortnite, part of the reason why something like that can easily exist is because there's nobody there to send that cease and desist. There's nobody there to have that initial conversation. Like, you can't just take this idea, but be able to have, because it's not just a financial conversation. It is both, because the largest export we have is hip hop, right? America, to me.
Culture, absolutely.
Culturally, the largest export we have is hip hop. And it's like, it's this thing that's malleable, that can go anywhere and be used for its own purposes within that space. You could be in a favela, you could be in Accra, you could be anywhere, and it's just all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, these are the components that we need to make it this, and then we can run with it from there.
First of all, I think that is a fascinating idea, right? Acquiring an HBCU. And it's so funny because I had a conversation online maybe 2 months ago, last year or something. And I was like, man, imagine how powerful HBCUs would become if Black athletes prioritized HBCUs. And the responses I got threw me off because I had a lot of people with Black avatars. I don't know if they were Black. It might have been Russian, with Black avatars.
Probably Russian.
But they showed up.
Or Chinese faking as Russians, faking as Black people.
Right. Right. But there's so many people popping up saying, why would Black people want to go to HBCUs? They're broke. Why would if you're a top athlete, why would you want to go to HBCU? Why wouldn't you want to go play at Duke or some shit? And I was like, most of these schools make their money off of their athletic programs. Then they wouldn't be broke no more. And then you would have these hubs of intellectualism supported by the other great Black export, sports entertainment. Like, it would be so powerful. As soon as that happens, then you're going to have stuff like what LeBron's, what's it called? What's his sports agency?
I totally forgot.
I can't think of what it's called.
I'm not a team sports person. So
right. LeBron's, Rich Paul, I guess we can't call it LeBron's agency. I guess technically it's not. But Rich Paul, Clutch Entertainment. Okay. Favorite story of last year. Favorite disruption story last year. I can't remember the athlete's name. One of the top 10 basketball players in the nation was going to go to Syracuse.
Okay.
He signed to play basketball at Syracuse. Rich Paul talked to this kid, or the kid talked to Rich Paul, whatever. Talked to him, wanted to sign him to Clutch. Decided that, you know what? What they decided to do was, you know what? Decommit from Syracuse. Take the year off. Train as hard as you can. We'll get you an internship at New Balance, who just signed Kawhi Leonard. Get you an internship at New Balance, and the internship will pay you $1 million. And you can learn the sportswear industry. You can become a millionaire now. You can dedicate all of your time to working out and learning new things. And then after that year, you go to the NBA draft. Now, your stock might fall a little bit. You're not going to get the consistent run in that same way. But those runs basically happen for 6 months out of the year. Then you run with them anyway. And you're already a millionaire. You don't have to risk injury the same way.
Yeah.
Jim Boeheim at Syracuse was really upset. I mean, that type of disruption.
No, but that is what's necessary. I mean,
it's what's necessary. And imagine that going into the Black-owned HBCU on the sports side, but also on the broader economic side. I think it would be there would be a lot of new legislation that pops up.
Worrying about
there's going to be a lot of that.
Infrastructure spending, real estate spending, all that sort of stuff. It's like we can talk about infrastructure in these other countries buying back Harlem may be hard, but buying into Port-au-Prince, buying into, there are places that can use the dollars and turn them in a whole very, very different way.
I definitely don't look at hard as a deterrent. I think all this is hard. I think it'd be hard just to get people to work together, to be honest.
Hope you're enjoying the conversation. I'm having with Justin Hunte, the company man. You can follow him at the company man on all socials. Make sure you also check me out. You can follow me at GoOOble. That's GODOUBLE 0. You can also check out the new Instagram at Free Range Pod. Make sure you lock that one in. And yeah, once again, I'm really interested in interacting with you guys, really interested in furthering the conversations that I'm starting on the podcast. So make sure you email freerangetalk@gmail.com, freerangetalk@gmail.com, and just let me know what you guys think. Back to the show. All right. So let's skip through the finance shit. You spend a bunch of time there, you're
Right.
bored. And then you say, what did you decide the day that you were like, fuck this, I am about to leave to go pursue a dream of poverty?
It's funny because I know, right? You know what's funny is that that's a perception. That's a question I get a lot. I think the perception is that I just got tired of finance and I want to do something else. It was a little bit different. When I lived in Amsterdam, I took an art history class. Mm-hmm. And the art history professor was like, you know what? He said it to the class, if you guys care about art history, you should take a painting class. If you take a painting class, that way you'll appreciate how difficult it is to create these works of art. Yeah. How difficult it is to show motion like Vermeer, perspective like Rembrandt, whatever. And when I moved to New York, I'm hanging around with my cousin Shy every day. You know how everybody has that older cousin, brother, teenage, 10-year-older person when you're a kid who shows you everything cool in life? Yeah. That was my cousin Shy. Incredible MC, indoctrinated me into hip hop when I was a baby, before I could even talk. You know, I'm rapping Peter Piper. We were doing Run DMC together. I'm 4 years old. He'd be Run, I'm DMC, Peter Piper, back and forth, right? That type of thing. After I'm, get off work, I'm spending all my weekends with him. We're hanging out, smoking weed, playing chess, listening to rap every day in the evenings. And I was like, I should write rhymes, because I had an art history professor who said that if I cared about art history, I should take a painting class. I don't want to be an MC. I don't want to be a professional rapper and artist, but I care this much about
that you
hip
want to write it. Yeah.
So I started writing rhymes. I got a messed up tag. I got a helicopter that's offbeat. I've really practiced or tried.
What was your rap name?
I didn't have one. It was my cousin called me J. Dot. Okay. But I wasn't really rapping. Yeah, I wasn't really trying to be a rapper, but I started writing rhymes on the subway, and then we record them on the computer, and that got me really close to what it felt like to actually create a rap. I would do this for like 2 years, and, we would just do it together with his friends or whatever, freestyling in the car, obviously, since I was born, but that was the first time I had ever spent time writing rhymes. And that process got me so much closer to the art of emceeing that I immediately had respect for all the rappers I ever thought were whack. Like anybody suddenly Memphis Bleek was amazing.
First of all, Memphis Bleek was never whack.
Okay. We'll leave that right there. People got different opinions on
He was never whack.
Okay.
He just couldn't be what people wanted him to be.
If someone's telling me new improved Jay-Z and they give me
like I said,
and I get Memphis Bleek.
A lot of things on the shoulders to carry.
But suddenly all the MCs that I like least, I had infinite more respect for. Yeah. Over that time I'm writing rhymes on the train, I noticed certain patterns that I would have. Like I would start off something new, fresh, and different, and then all of a sudden end up with money, clothes, bitches, hoes, weed. Like everything would start off different and end up in the same place. I realized how difficult it is to tell a story or a narrative or to be open and vulnerable, to talk about women or relationships. And I started noticing those patterns in other artists that came out as well. I started noticing when people's new album sounded like their last album, and then a couple of weeks later, I'd read something that most of those songs are made around the same time. I could tell when an artist hadn't experienced anything new in life because everything sounds the same. I could tell when people are really pushing their pen and they're, working on new styles, and it happens over time. Like when Eminem went from Slim Shady Marshall Mathers LP, he shows up on the Massacre and on Games album, and then all of a sudden when he comes out with Encore, you could tell how he's really in the beat now. He's been trying to do that for 4 albums. You can see the progress of when people are trying to get to where they are. Right. And I felt it. And that's kind of where I was. And then Lupe came out. So Lupe came out and it was like, yo, this cat right here doesn't have any holes in his lyrical utility belt. You know, I mean, my personal opinion on, I get asked this a lot. What do I think is important or most important when it comes to a rapper, MC, lyricist? And for me, it's voice and imagination. How do you sound when you're saying something in a way that, how do you sound when you're saying something that everyone else has said in a brand new way? Like, how do you talk about love and not sound like the history of art on the planet? They've been talking about love with sunshine and sunsets and sonnets. How do you find a fresh way to say it? And everything was hitting in a fresh way. So I started while I was at work. By this point, I'm at Bank of America Securities. I was
fucking shit up.
You know what I'm saying?
You were over there fucking.
I was in financial institutions group too.
He's over here fucking shit. I got friends that fucked it all up too. Hopefully you got out. No, you probably fucked a little shit up before you got out of here.
I had a great time. I'll say that.
And fucked America up.
I learned a lot about things. I learned a lot. So, but I would send emails to my friends from college, you know, my old friends from high school, because we were all becoming a bit jaded. Not all of us, but generationally speaking, my generation started getting jaded about what was happening on radio and television. Okay. There was so much consolidation that everyone heard the same songs all the time. And it was such a de-emphasis on a lot of things that we all felt made the 90s and 80s really great.
And we're in the thick of Snap era. Like, you know, the reason that Kids in the Hall found any sort of success is because I want to say Laffy Taffy comes out the summer of 05, something like that.
Feels like it.
And then like B comes out like the winter, you know, like fall. And I feel like that was where you started to get this shift. And then you have Kick Push that comes out. And then you have Rhyme Fest starts and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, around the same time.
Around the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, all my favorite MCs at that time came from Chicago because everything that was coming out of Chicago was largely lyrics focused. That's what the Shy was selling. But so I started this sending emails to my friends. It was called Lupe Fiasco's Daily Quotable. And I would send emails about something Lupe said and just breaking it down how dope it was, because I wanted them to see that there's examples of people who are coming out or artists that were doing things that, one, were unique to things that we'd even experienced or seen from a talent technical standpoint, and two, were the antithesis of the things we became frustrated by when we were talking about what was happening in rap at the time. And a friend of mine, shout out to Anid Peralta, she was like, you know what, you should start a blog. This is 06, right? I'm like, blogs are played out. I didn't know what I was talking.
You were ahead of the game.
I didn't know what I was talking about. I was scared. I was just like,
yeah, that is always the thing. The fear will make you say some shit is played out, and you're just like, I'm not about to do this.
That is 100% real. So she was like, no, look, she took the emails, copied and pasted the text, and actually put them in a blog spot and was like, yo, see, now you can save all your emails here and everyone else can see them outside the store. And I was like, this is brilliant, right? Yeah. So I started my own blog, and after work, I would go home.
So you're the original. You started Genius before you even knew, and then they ran with it.
You know what? I need to call them guys up right now. Let them know I need my percentage or two. You know, but by the time I did that, and I did the Lupe Fiasco Daily Quotable all the way up until Food and Liquor came out, because I also felt like it was my personal responsibility to support things that I liked at that time. But by the time I started the blog, it expanded and I was talking about other things. And initially, you know, my favorite thing in the world was to read an album review most of my life. And so I had this, you know, this drive to be like the greatest album reviewer ever. I wanted to start learning how to write album reviews. And so I'd get off work and it'd be 9, 10, 11 at night, and I'd spend the next 2 hours twisting up, smoking, drinking Jameson, smoking Black and Mild, and trying to write an album review. It would take me 2 weeks to, you know, review Games, the documentary, or whatever album it was, right? And throughout that process, I just fell in love with
writing
and contextualizing my thoughts on things that were happening in the world. Not everything was 100% music based, because obviously my interests are broader than just what's happening in rap or hip hop. But it was something. Hip hop culture is something that I think we all just grew up around.
And you were still at the job at this
Still
point.
at the bank.
Okay.
Yeah. So much like video games or technology, whether we like rap or not, everybody knows the theme song to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
100%.
I don't play video games at all, but I can tell you the history of Mario. I can look at Smash Brothers right now and be like, I get it. I never even touched it. So, it's over the next, I did that for 06 to let's say 07. And 07, that's when I realized how much more I enjoyed writing about rap than anything else. Not even just banking, anything else. Like, it was my favorite thing to do. Yeah. And I started benchmarking the stuff that I was writing versus what I was reading. So I would check out Hip Hop DX. I would check out The Source. I'd check out XXL. I'd check out All Hip Hop.
Here comes this motherfucking hubris again.
Right. I started benchmarking. And what I found was that not everything I wrote was better than what I was reading, but it also wasn't worse than what I was reading. So I started to feel competitive. Like, hey, if I tried to really do this,
I could maybe do it.
I could at least write on the level that I'm reading.
Yeah. Now,
this isn't necessarily the same. This isn't the same thing as I'm no Maureen Dowd at the New York Times at the time and what she was on back then. But, I was like, oh, man, maybe I should really give it a go. One of my favorite interviews ever in life is when Dave Chappelle was on Inside the Actors Studio. And one of the things that he says in that interview, he says, the guy asked him why he decided to go into comedy, or what was like when he told his parents that he wanted to go into comedy, because he'd been hanging out in comedy clubs since he was in high school or something. And Chappelle said, I went to my dad and said, hey, I want to be a stand-up comedian. And his dad said, that's stupid. You won't make any money. And then Dave said, well, Dad, how much do you make? I guess his dad, had a blue-collar job of some sort. He said, I make $40,000 a year. And then Dave said, if I can make $40,000 a year as a comedian, I'd be happy. And his dad said, go out and do it. So in my mind, I'm like, I think I might be able to make $40,000 a year writing about rap. I should give this a shot. Now, at the same time, the whole world is collapsing in investment banking. So the timing actually ended up working out better.
Yeah, because it's happening.
It's happening,
right? That's when the whole...
Yeah, and not because of... I made VP when I was 25. I wasn't in danger. I didn't feel in danger of losing my job. But there was also great buyouts happening around that time in the space. Like, so I could leave with a launch pad coming off of... bonus season.
100%.
Right? Lehman Brothers crashes, September 2008. By 2009, half the banks were gone. Bonuses were smaller, but you got your bonus, and you got, by June 2009, after you've already got your bonus, you now get, a buyout package of some sort. So I started looking at that as, okay, I can leave with
a good chunk of money.
Right. Because the other thing I was debating at that time was I didn't know if I should go to journalism school or not. And I had
that good school rears its ugly head again.
So a friend of mine, or one of the MDs at the bank, I don't know if I call her a friend, but she was definitely an advocate. And her husband was a writer for Sports Illustrated. Mm-hmm. So I said, hey, I'm thinking about, going to write about becoming a journalist. Yeah. Do you think I need to go to journalism school? And she was like, yes. How else are you going to build relationships? And I was like, that's a pretty good point. So I started applying. I applied to journalism schools. All the journalism schools I applied to were in Chicago. Because all my favorite rappers were from Chicago at that time. So I applied to Medill. I applied to Columbia. University of Illinois Chicago had a program. What's the other one? What's the really good technical school? Chicago University. Yeah. But that one didn't have a journalism program. So I only applied to schools in Chicago. And then after I got my acceptance letters and I really started thinking about it, all these programs were $30,000 plus for 1 year. I want to write about rap. Do I need to spend $30,000 to go get a degree to start writing about rap?
To make $40,000.
Right. I'm like, I live in Brooklyn. Yeah. I can throw a rock and hit a rapper right now. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to go ahead and just try to figure this out on my own. And in 2009, I left. My first article was published on DX in 2010.
Did you wait till you got your bonus before you left?
100%. Nobody, you don't leave no money on the table. What you think this is?
Oh, man, I wish. Sometimes
I had money saved too, which was good.
Sometimes I wish I was that smart, but I chased a whole other dream. So I was just broke 2 times over before I entered into the fucking. Right. I was like, oh no, I need to be a professional athlete in a sport that doesn't pay you until you fucking win the Olympics. So
right.
It's like,
wait, so where were you placing when you're competing?
I mean, for me, I was, it starts, obviously I was state champ in New Jersey. Then I was Ivy League champ at Penn, and then got out here. And at first I was not running. The reason why I even came out here is one of my homeboys and I from Penn, we thought we had a deal. So Knowledge was a solo artist. It was never meant to be a group. It was like we were a production company. I managed and produced and co-managed with my homie, G. And he was like the super outgoing, knew the lay of the land, yada, yada, yada. So we thought we had to deal with 310 Motoring. 310 Motoring at the time was trying to launch an entertainment division because of all their relationships. Right. And so we played the Knowledge records. They loved it, yada, yada, yada. So I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to figure it out. $2,500 in the bank came out here. And yeah, we got out here and thought shit was popping. But the dude who was in charge of the label at the time, he had his own agenda with his own boys that he signed that was like, they're up first, whatever. So eventually I had to get a job because clearly you can't live on $2,500. And I was working in Westwood, and then that was kind of when I kind of like fell back into the idea of running track. But it was a very short amount of time from, I really only ran track professionally for 2.5 years. So It wasn't even really like a thing about placing as much as it was like, I'm on this journey for world championships, Olympics, all that sort of stuff, And I ran like shit in the Olympics, but I ran.
But you went to the Olympics.
It is. So weird.
You said this is Athens.
Athens, yeah. And I'm going to have my old roommate on the podcast in a little bit because we've got a bunch of shit that we're planning. But like...
That's still got to feel amazing, though.
It feels amazing. At the same time, it also felt like the universe, again, is trying to fuck with me because not only was I in the heat with the Greek national champion, which means that they only give a fuck about him, obviously, because you're in Athens. But I was also in the heat with my roommate.
Oh, wow.
And my training partner. It was just kind of like, now we're throwing you in with your boy, and y'all just got to go.
That's
track
crazy.
is so interesting in that way. But yeah, it was fun. Yeah, so to get back, so you're like, you got the bonus, your good money. So you're like, cool. About to go do this rap writing shit.
Right.
Obviously, you find some success. Right. You start, writing for a couple blogs, become editor-in-chief of a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. But because what I'm always interested about is everybody's like those significant jumps. So it was like, did you foresee that video would become...
No.
I
did.
So what made you guys even start?
I foresaw video probably 2011. I knew video was coming because phone memory got larger, and everywhere I went, I saw people recording all their concerts. If you go to a show, you got to a point where either someone had a flip cam.
That was the era of the what was that company that doesn't exist anymore? Remember Consequence got super famous on it. It was like the Nokia phones that they were giving out in New York at the time. They were like slide up phones, but they had I want to say they had an SD card in it. Do you remember that era when all of the Consequence backstage kind of like content stuff was happening? Right, it was a very specific company that was doing it. I remember getting the phone. We lost it twice.
Oh, wow.
And so they said, fuck y'all.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That era is when it starts to happen.
I mean, flip phones were out. Now, flip phones were out. I mean, flip cams. Flip cams were out. Handhelds got really small. They were all USB drive. You can get 500 megs of stuff or whatever. And I saw that happening. And then iPhones came out and iPads. When the iPad came out, so that's 2011, right? 11, 12 is when iPad comes out. When the iPad comes out, you can shoot your video and then upload the video straight to YouTube. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this video thing is going to be crazy. But I didn't have an aspiration to use my voice literally. I didn't have a dream to go into radio. I didn't think about going to video. I didn't think about hosting events. All those things kind of happened, just sheer universe giving me opportunities to fail less publicly. But was it out of necessity
at that time where it was kind of like you were so you made the decision to go on camera then for those Hip Hop DX joints?
It's so funny because I had a crazy 3 months. I almost quit. I almost quit in 2000. Not almost quit, but I had basically $100,000. My plan was to make it last 5 years in New York. If I made it to 5 years, after 5 years, I'd see where I was. I'd reevaluate. How competitive am I still? Is this something I still enjoy? Am I where I want to be? And if I'm not, then I would decide whether or not I want to go back to finance or whether or not I want to go to journalism school. It's like, okay, maybe I do need journalism school. So that was my goal. I got to 3 years and I was down to, I'm like halfway through, 3/4 of the way through the third year, and I'm down to like $30,000. Yeah. I'm like, this ain't gonna make it another 2. What am I gonna do? So I was like, all right, well, what happens? I was like, maybe I should just go back to the bank for 6 months, get my cash right again,
and then roll out.
But then I was like, I can't do that. I won't be active. I won't be a part of the community in this anymore. At this point, I was editor-in-chief of Brooklyn Bodega at that point in time. Because of that, I ended up hosting Brooklyn Bodega Radio because I did well on that. PNC gave me my own show, so I was on air 5 days a week.
PNC,
remember that?
PNC, I mean, that was the first and only time that I did Combat Jack.
Say word, yeah.
Yeah, we only did Combat Jack once, and then, why can I remember his name? Fucking Mr.
Motherfucking Esquire.
Yes. He just shut our interview down. Like he rolled in with the whole crew and was like, yo, we're here.
Right.
I was just like, I'm all right, this is done.
Right. Yo, man, he had so much promise. I thought he was going to.
I got in the studio with him when he first moved out here. We had worked on some ideas, but.
Yeah, he's talented.
Yeah.
Cool guy, too. So that was the same era I was at PNC. So Combat Jack, at the time, because Combat shows started 2 months before mine did. I want to say, but I was hosting Brooklyn Bodega Radio, which was the #1 show on the network. Then Combat Jack got his show. Then they gave me my own show. And then, so it went Combat Jack. And then, so within the next year or 6 months, Combat Jack had the #1 show. And then I hosted Brooklyn Bodega Radio, which was #2. And then my show was #3, right? So I ended up getting all these extra reps. And because I'm on radio now I'm getting people giving me the opportunity to host their listening parties, their concerts, their events, right? So within a community, my name was getting around, but I also got different experience, right? Now I'm able to, I know what it's like to talk live on stage with a microphone. I know what it's like to hold down a crowd. I know what it's like to interview people in different conversations. So I had these additional reps. And September 2012, that's when I looked up and I'm like, yo, I'm running out of bread. Maybe I should go back to the bank. Nah, I can't do that. I won't be active. I won't be on air every day of the week anymore. I won't be able to go to whatever shows. I won't be able to check out these open mics. And I was like, all right, what does this look like if I go broke? Like, if I have no money, what does this look like?
So you weren't getting paid Brooklyn Bodega, any of that?
No, You know, man, entertainment, it takes a long time to get paid.
I just never know when the, like, you know.
What's for show and what's for dough.
Well, just because in that era in New York, everybody is doing something. So you don't really know who's making money or not because we're all at the same fucking free album. Again, like the listening party,
the free drinks,
free liquor, and maybe some hors d'oeuvres. And you're just like, I'm about to eat right now.
Yeah, especially
and everyone has to pay rent. So you're like.
And then plus in that era of the industry, not even the artists were always making money. I mean, you know that, right? So
I didn't make any money.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was talking to Don Will about. It's just like, man, we were sacrificial lambs. Right. I mean, I get it, you know, but I wish I wasn't a sacrificial lamb in New York. I definitely wasn't as smart about it because everything we pretty much reinvested.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I started to appreciate the power of branding around that time. Okay. Right. That's when, because the reason my name is the Company Man in the first place is because I needed an alias when I first started the blog at the bank because I didn't want to get fired because I was doing stuff at work. And I was worried about accidental dream killers. I didn't want my family or friends to see that I was writing and be like, why are you wasting your time? I didn't know how much, writing then it was still a hobby and I liked it. So I came up with the Company Man because I felt like a company man. It's like that scene in Next Friday when Day-Day and Craig are smoking in the back of Pinky's record shop. And then Day-Day is like, oh, we got to clean up real quick for Pinky get here. And Craig's like, company man, fucking company man. So I started putting TCM on stuff and, all these, the branding got better. But I was like, what happens if I go broke, right? Let's say 6 months, I'm completely out of money. What's that look like? Well, I have to move back to South Carolina with my family. All right, well, what would I do down there? Well, my dad at the time owned a couple of Liberty Tax franchises. So I was like, I guess I'll help out with the family business. All right, well, what does that look like for my writing goals? Well, I can still freelance for DX. I can do interviews on the phone, album reviews. Two of my fraternity brothers, they each own nightclubs in the area. I know artists now.
So now you can book them there.
I can have artists come through, and then when they're there, I can interview them. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, this could still work.
Yeah. Like
I'd have to move, but it would still go. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, we'll ride this till the wheels fall off. So that was September 2012. After that, I get the Lupe Fiasco Food and Liquor 2 album review, my first album review for DX for Lupe ever. Right after that, I get invited to, they asked me to go to A3C. They sent me to A3C to do all their on-camera interviews. I met the CFO for the first time, got to talk to him about, the business of the organization. And he got to see how all my questions were about the business of the organization. Then right after that, I get the Good Kid, Mad City album review, which was the biggest album review in the history of Hip Hop DX at that time. Then a month later in December, they invite me to their year-end company conference. Yeah. So it's everybody on the staff and then me sitting there and we're looking at numbers and stuff. And then the day after, the night after the conference is over, they asked me if I want to be editor-in-chief. They gave me the editor-in-chief offer. I was 3 months from quitting. Yeah. I was almost about to go back to the bank just because of money. You know what I mean? Yeah. So so for the next month, I'm training with Jake Payne, my mentor. None of this is possible without him.
Pause real quick. So for you, looking back, you were able to make that decision ultimately only because your worst case scenario at that time was still not really as terrible as it could be if you're just like, oh, it's going to be devastating. It's going to be over. I'm going to have to move and drive all the way back and be whatever. You were like, oh, no, I can make this work.
Right. Yeah. If I had to change everything that was happening around me, I could still carve a path through the machete my way through the jungle.
Exactly.
In order to still achieve my goal. So I became less reliant on the resources or the amenities in my situation.
Because at that time you had shifted already to knowing that you were essentially the commodity ultimately in your situation, not the whatever they were providing you.
Exactly. And it's not because I wasn't making any money. I was just spending my money investing in myself, essentially, right? This is just really what it was.
It's an easier decision when you got it like that.
Right. I look at it because, in retrospect, it would have been cheaper to go to journalism school, right? I still would have had more money saved. I could have went to journalism school. It was only $30,000. And then I would have came out and I could have been writing for whatever organization. I probably would have got paid out the jump. But I wouldn't have been a part of a community, so I wouldn't have developed cachet. I wouldn't have got a chance to experiment with radio haphazardly. I wouldn't have been a part of a festival to see the festival side of the business. And none of that would have done a great job of extending my skill sets, forcing me in situations where I have to be able to present stuff in a different way, which would have changed my whole video career at all. I'd probably just be a guy at a desk, and I probably wouldn't have been editor-in-chief as fast as I was.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like, asking others like their idea now. Oftentimes, especially online, especially post 2008, there's all these conversations about, education's place in your goals.
Right.
And like for me directly, if I didn't go to Penn, nothing exists. I don't mean knowledge. I don't have the tools to even be able to do what I do. And so it's interesting because it's like you have two sides. You have the obviously your first undergraduate side that I'm sure you would say now was probably necessary.
100%.
Yeah. And then, but then you have this like the idea to go back, and it's just like, nah.
Right. I don't know. I didn't need it twice because the same thing that happened with you happened to me. Right. If I never go to college, I don't study abroad in Amsterdam. I don't do that. Not only less likely that I even move to New York, spend as much time with my cousin Shaw, and being around the culture in a position to pivot to something else I wanted to do, but most importantly, I would have never taken that art history class where the professor said, if you like art history, take a painting class. Yeah. That's the whole reason I was able to start. That's the whole force that inspired me to start looking at the way, the technique, the style, the evolution of MCs as critically as I did. So this is all college was necessary.
Yeah.
But the extra degree, I didn't need
too many of them.
I didn't need it twice.
Yeah.
Because the second time around is just basically additional proof that I can complete something.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't need two pieces of evidence.
It's a certificate of completion.
That's really what it is. Yeah. Oh, man, he completed something. Let's bring him on in. And social media was coming out, so I could see the tide changing. And the reason why I bring all this up is because once I get the offer for the next month, between December 2012, I guess 6 weeks we'll say, till February 2013, I'm training with Jake, learning how the organization works without it being announced to the rest of the team. So I'm in the back end, everything that's happening, I'm there. He's showing me how to be editor-in-chief, how to run the publication, working directly with the publisher, the CFO, everybody. Put together a whole content strategy over that time, what our goals were, how we're going to execute all these things, made the presentation to the company, took over as editor-in-chief, and the next day, me, the CFO, and the CEO, Michael Hogan Miller's the CFO, Sharf Charian's the CEO, we go to lunch with DJ Vlad. We go to dinner with DJ Vlad. So we sit down with Vlad.
That guy.
We sit down with Vlad, and Vlad starts breaking down the economics around how much money he was making off of YouTube on his own, and also in conjunction with the Complex Network. So the next day, it was like, all right, Justin, figure out video.
Yeah.
So that put me in a position where I had to figure out how to create a content strategy, serial products for Hip Hop DX that will work within the Complex Network, but also on our own. And fortunately, I had some experience with that because of PNC Radio, Brooklyn Bodega, the Company Man show over there. And also experienced hosting things on stage. We had started doing some video stuff, obviously, at Brooklyn Bodega my last year there. And so when it came time to talk about stuff that was happening on camera, I was prepared for it. We created a daily news show for DX called the DX Daily. It was a 3-block show, 3 different stories in 1 block. Nobody watched it. We created a freestyle show called Hollywood Freestyle because we were in Hollywood. We had just opened up the office. This is what brought me to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So we'd had no video experience. Yeah. Nobody on the staff does video. So our grand plan was, all right, we're going to invite rappers over. We'll pull out a camera, give them a microphone, and tell them to rap. So we shot all these Hollywood freestyles that nobody watched either. But we got a lot of reps really fast. And so we were able to, I'm huge on, reps, right? I'm huge on 10,000 hours. Right?
Yeah.
So we were able to stack reps really fast, figure out what worked and what didn't. The Daily Show, the news show that nobody watched, 1 week, Jay-Z and Solange get in a fight in the elevator, right? It ends up being the biggest story of the week. And so that Friday, instead of doing our regular episode of the DX Daily, 3 different stories for 1 episode, I was like, you know what? Forget it. This week, we're just going to break down everything that happened in this Jay-Z Solange fight. This is a point in YouTube where hip-hop blog, hip-hop media wasn't doing that. Everybody was still focused on making the videos as short as possible, right? One of the reasons why we did the 3 blocks was so people can get a sense of what was happening on the site, what was happening in the culture. But every episode of the 3-block news show was under 2 minutes, right? So we're racing through these things. We're talking about 1 sentence, 1 headline, 1 quote, out, right? And so the longest episode we did was this breakdown of all the turns. And it was the only video that we'd made so far that was focused exclusively on 1 topic. And boom, 1,500 views. The biggest we'd ever had.
You're like, oh, shit.
1,500 views. You know how much of a success that felt like? We'd been doing this show for probably a year.
Yeah.
And we were struggling. 1,500 views? We got 1,500 views in one day, and it felt like a major success, right? So it was like, oh, shoot, this is something we should do. So we started not forcing the issue every week, but if there was a big news story, we would try to, every Friday would be the Breakdown Friday, right? We do a battle rap one, ends up being 5,000. But one thing that I noticed was that this was the first piece of evidence that we ever had internally that contradicted the idea that everybody wants things that are short. So over time, we started pushing, because I was writing them, I started pushing the lengths of all these every time, fighting the organization. Like, no, man, people, I go to the gym, I see people on the treadmill, they're watching Netflix on their phone. If it's dope, people will stay in. Yeah. And so we did it that way for a while, marginal results. And everything was still really news-based. It wasn't that evergreen. And that became the next challenge. The biggest leap, we did an episode called Is Lean Killing Lil Wayne, right? And it was all about, at that point, Lil Wayne's latest seizure. And then it branches off into other examples of artists who we'd interviewed. Yeah. Well, no, the opposite. It was RZA, Royce da 5'9", and Ritz. And it was 3 different artists we'd interviewed who talked about how sobriety actually made their careers better, right? So we put that at the end. And it was the first piece that I was so proud of that I sent to Torre. Now, the journalist Torre.
Yeah. There's only one.
Well, there's Torre the rapper from Coney Island.
Yeah, but
he's a friend of mine too.
For some reason, I pronounced them
You brought him up first.
I pronounced them differently. It's like Torre and Torre.
Oh, okay. Look at that, man. That's that Ivy League right there.
Torre's back in the news now.
You're looking at the accent marks.
Hey.
But so I sent it to Torre, and Torre is my, I think he's the greatest rap writer of all time. And the reason I say it is because he started off focused on hip hop and did it on every medium, radio, in print, on television, so well that he ended up hosting The Cycle on MSNBC.
Yeah. Which
is a political show, while still embodying hip hop. So he was able to take it past the medium in which he started, and so which is something that I've always, has been part of my aspirations. So I was really nervous about sending him anything. Yeah. Anybody that I love and respect, that I emulate, I model my, my path after. I try not to just hit him up anytime, And I didn't feel like I had anything that he would truthfully respect, right? So this was like the best thing ever. And I was like, not best thing ever, the best thing we had done. So I sent it to him, and I was like, nervous. I'm like, what do you think about this, Torre? And he gave me 3 pieces of advice. He said, first thing is, it's too long. And I was like, nah, throw that out. Been hearing that for years. The longer they get more successful, whatever. The second thing he said was, it's too news heavy. One of the problems we ran into at The Cycle was that by the end of the week, whenever we talked about something, everyone else had already talked about it. He said, so make it less news and more opinion. And then the third thing he said was, try to find a way to make it move more. Because then I was just standing in front of the camera talking. And I was like, the second and third one were priceless. So call it 3 weeks later, we change the whole format and go straight evergreen. And we do a piece called De La Soul and Tupac's Forgotten Rap Beef. And so De La had an album that was coming out, and they're about to go on tour. When I was at Brooklyn Bodega, my first big interview ever in my career was De La Soul, because they headlined the 2010 Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival. My main goal to interview them that day was to figure out why Tupac dissed him on Machiavelli. You look like Larry Holmes, flabby and sick. Look at De La Soul, he said in the background. Yeah. I never understood that. So this is 2010. I interviewed Tretch, Dave, and I interviewed all 3 of them, and separately, and Maceo, separately, asked them those questions separately. So I've got all of them on record separately. we really have no reason to talk about De La Soul and Tupac's Forgotten Beef. And this lane in YouTube rap conversation wasn't even there at this point either.
At all. Yeah.
Meaning, okay, now I'm not just breaking down the story of the week, but here's some piece of weird history. We're going to do a quality video on it.
History, yeah.
Right. So we did the story on that. That ended up being the topic that week. And instead of having me stand in front of the camera, we sit me behind a desk. But instead of just having a static camera in the front with a tripod, we switch it to monopod, which has a slight movement to it no matter how you do it. And every time, we cut away to a graphic or, interstitial, anytime you cut back, it was a completely different angle, right? So it felt like it was moving. Every minute that went by, every time I came back on screen, you had to readjust. So you couldn't predict what was happening. And the topic was evergreen. And it blew up. We got 60,000 views in a weekend or something like that, which was crazy. But now we had a formula. So everything after that began to take shape, right? This is 2016 now. After this, I'm like, hey, this rap beef. Let's do Bone Thugs and Harmony's Forgotten Beef with 3 6 Mafia, Crucial Conflict, and Nelly, right? Then I'm like, oh, let's do Michael Jackson and Prince, because I just interviewed Quincy Jones, right? But then after that, it's like...
I sat on that story for so long.
Yeah, that's good.
Because we have a mutual friend that told me that story. And it was just like, I think I heard it in 2008. I've literally was sitting on it. I was just like, this whole, like, what? Prince tried to kill Michael Jackson?
Right.
But yeah, sorry.
It's amazing, right?
Continue.
So, and then I was like, man, we can't just keep doing this beef thing. This can't be a beef show. We had the format down. We knew we could talk about evergreen stuff, have way more interest than generally what was ever happening, from a trending topic standpoint. For us at that time, all the numbers are going up, 60,000 one week, 70,000. And then the other old ones are now picking up because that's how the internet works. So then I'm like, you know what? Redman might be the greatest rapper of all time. And this is something I thought about years ago, right? Because Redman has all the things that people celebrate Jay-Z for, right? I mean, he's got multiple classics. He's changed the face of hip-hop to a point where he's inspiring everybody in Detroit, including Eminem. He's got all kinds of ill, off-wax appearances. He produced his first album, used all the funk samples that Dr. Dre used, and that project dropped 8 months before The Chronic, before Dre was even doing it. So it's like, yeah, why not? Yeah. So we did the whole piece. He's one of the best cypher MCs ever, freestyle MCs.
I've realized when you were saying that you missed out on the era because you weren't in New York, growing up in Jersey, having Funkmaster Flex. There's a Funkmaster Flex, I don't remember what year it was, definitely the mid-90s. Where Redman is on and he freestyles for like 2 hours. And at that point I was like, this dude is the greatest motherfucking dude
right.
in the world. But yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He's from Brick City. I was born in Newark. And then I was like, yo, if hip hop is the cast of Hangover, Redman is rap Zach Galifianakis. Insanely quotable, eccentric in the best possible ways. And when it was all over, the best part of the whole show. And so yeah, why not? We throw that one up, right? That one blows up. The week after we do, so I'm like, oh man, this could be a series. You could do this on anybody. Yeah. And then the week after, I'm like, how to beat Drake in a rap beef. Let me tell people how to beat Drake in a rap beef. 2 years later, Pusha T uses a model. So every week now, I realize I can talk about something old. I can bring in somebody nobody thinks about and the audience still trusts. We're sitting around 60, 70% retention on all these videos. Yeah. I can hypothesize, make a theory about how to beat Drake. Okay, the audience trust is picking up. The one thing that's important to me that I hadn't been able to prove yet from a case study standpoint was I still hadn't figured out how to talk about social issues and get people to care. And then Meek Mill and Game get into a beef around the same time that all of these different,
Mike Brown and
right. Yeah. Right, I think it was the year after because Mike Brown was the year before, and then it happened again. It was like a whole wave the year after, and so I use Game and Meek Mill's beef to talk about how the game is fucked up. So we did that. We got 150,000 views in the first hour. We had not seen, like,
you were like, oh shit.
Oh, it was blowing up, right? And the last line on that video was like, would any of you had clicked on this video if you didn't think it was just about rap beef? And boom. After that, we went from 5,000 subscribers when we started the channel to 250,000 subscribers in like 8 months. It was wild fast. And for me and my personal brand, now it put me in a situation where anything that I write, anything I talk about had increased cachet, more name facial recognition ever. It was the combination of everything that I experienced since Lupe Fiasco's Daily Quotable, and it embodied all the things that I experienced in life coming through in a conversation that looks at life through the lens of hip hop, which ultimately became my mission. So that was where everything leaped.
And so eventually you leave and you start your own thing.
I leave a year later because I got invited to debate at Oxford Union in the UK. It's the oldest debating society in the nation, or in the world. Einstein's been there, everybody's been there. They invited me to debate whether Kanye West was more relevant than William Shakespeare. Right? Interesting discussion. I wanted to argue for Kanye. They asked me to argue for Shakespeare because they had people that they were already using for
interesting
Shakespeare.
How'd that go?
It could go. I won my argument and we won. I won my argument and we won the side.
Awesome.
So it was perfect. And so after I got back, I was like, man, it's time for me to leave DX.
Yeah. No, it sounds about right. So it's funny because obviously we're in the midst of a lot of shit going on right now. And so as I guess if you consider yourself a journalist, commentator on culture, whatever it is.
Yeah. Journalist. I like journalists.
How do you attack now stories, ideas, and things, knowing that you're in this space where, like, literally, Louis C.K. driving the N-word from however many years ago can be current news versus a school shooting today or some shit that happened this week because, a beef.
I go back to what Torre told me. Right.
Yeah, that's
try to connect things to bigger topics.
Okay.
So most of the things, I mean, again, it's just like what I admire most about my favorite MCs, voice and imagination, right? People have been talking about love forever, and they're going to be talking about school shootings forever. They're going to talk about race stuff forever.
Yeah.
The entry point is always going to be probably the same, right? Until we start getting into fights over teleportation or new things that don't exist. But even the backbone of that's probably going to be similar. So. And I have enough reps now between, not only in this field, but in life to understand ways to use almost any incident as an entry point into a bigger, broader topic, right? So I try to, one thing I don't like doing is, what's the most clever thing I can say right now?
Yeah.
But I think that would be the initial thought.
How do you keep from doing that? Because I know that basically, like, when I think about a lot of journalism now, and I think about a lot of conversations, it only exists in the negative, right? If you don't have an adverse reaction to a thing, it's not enough of an article to write or be news.
I think friction has to be a part of it, but I think there's ways to create friction without dissing something.
Okay.
For example, the biggest video I ever put up has 4 million views, 3 million views. It's hip hop hates mumble rap, right? And the friction is mumble rap. It's polarizing on its own, but the piece looks at Ice-T versus Soulja Boy, how it sounds like Pete Rock versus Uzi Vert, Yachty, and mumble rap sounds like African chanting. It sounds like what you do before you go to war.
Yeah.
Right? So the friction is in the perspective. I say that to say that if I don't understand something, I won't talk about it until I do. And when I do understand it, I'll find the right time to where I can weave that in. Here's a piece I have coming up around the Oscars, for example. Black Panther killed the Black Panthers, right? Now, it's a thought that I sat with for a while after Black Panther, after I saw it. But I'd only seen it once in the movie theater. And it's a hot take, but I don't know if it was going to necessarily be a lasting feeling. If I'm going to take time to produce something, to write something, produce something, deliver something, and have my name, face, voice all in it, I like it to be, if I'm going to do that, I like to be different. If I'm in a podcast or if I'm on Shade 45 or something like that, if I'm on All Out Show with Jude, okay, now we're just free flowing. But if I'm crafting something, it's the equivalent of me making a song or an album, right? So I've been thinking about this all year. That first scene of the movie, it's one of them Black Panther type, hey, we got to get some money for the community center. We're going to use it with these super weapons. And here come the Wakandans. Here comes Black Panther taking out the Black Panthers.
Fucking shit up.
Right. So, this is an old thought, an old idea that I've actually now sat with that has another life around, because there's always something else to come back around to. Yeah. And if I don't expect something to have that, then that whatever that was about wasn't big enough for me to leap off the table with anyway.
Yeah, no.
Right? You saw how long did we talk about Drogas, right? Drogas Wave, right?
Oh, you mean when you called me?
Yeah, when I called you.
Yeah, we took it for a long ass fucking time.
I made like 5-6 phone calls to anybody that was around, the project, who knew his history. Not even people that just knew y'all, like even people who were just old Lupe fans that I knew, came up with, just to get an idea of what other people thought was happening. Because this was such a different project in the sense of, to me, it's a lot like The Cool, but The Cool, you had an idea of what was happening before the album came out, right? Lou wasn't as vocal about the nuances of Drogas Wave ahead of time as he was with The Cool, so we didn't all have an idea. The listener, the fan, didn't know what to do, how to digest it, right? And so within 72 hours, I had an opinion, or I had a perspective, or I knew how to talk about it in a way that was going to drive the market.
But see, that's the greatest, that to me, and that's why I make it my best album of the year, is because that's what we used to do, right? Like, you would get a record, and then you'd, like, whenever you got up with your homies and they also, did you get the new, whatever, did you get that fucking... the summer that It's Dark and Hell is Hot comes out, right? Like, that shit, all my homies at the time, we were all basically athletes stuck at Penn because we, had to take extra classes, also had to work out, football players, athletes, track athletes, whatever. And like, that shit was so important to just our idea and ideals at the time but it's like, you could have these really dope in-depth discussions about this because you were talking about and discovering, all these nuances you may or may not have paid attention to. And I feel like, I don't know if people have those as much as they have conversations at people about the projects. But at that, let's wrap this up, because we can keep motherfucking talking about it. So
chop it up.
Might have to break it into two. Yeah. But thank you, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me. I
figured you would help me figure this whole shit out.
Man, you're one of my favorite people to talk to, on or off record. You know what I mean? I've been obviously a fan of Kids in the Hall and You and Knowledge forever. And it's just dope to